Welcome back to Talk the Walk with me, Sarah Wong. I'm with Kim McCoy, barrister and the founder of Hong Kong Animal Law and Protection Organization. Thank you very much, Kim, for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
I understand there's outcry, especially among pet owners, right? As you said, there's an innate bond between pet owners and their pet. And after the government ordered the mass culling of these thousands of small animals, I understand there's frustration. But as I mentioned in the beginning, some panicked pet owners discarded their pets after the announcement. It sounded awfully like an irresponsible personal decision. So my question is, would the crux be resolved if individual welfare and concern groups like your organization, cooperate with the government and to minimize the damage and without, entirely laying the blame on the authorities?
No, absolutely. I mean, the one thing that we didn't want happen as a result of this news outbreak was for pet owners to abandon their animals because as we know, hamsters, they're not used to living in Hong Kong roads or parks or streets. They're confined to a cage most of their life. So, I mean, it's the welfare of the animals that needs to be at the forefront of any decision made. And that's also the same at the governmental level. That's why I'm suggesting that, it's the welfare of the animal that needs to be considered before any policy is implemented. And the fact that the culling policy completely negates or completely neglects the welfare of hamsters just means it's not a good policy and it should not be implemented. I mean, it'd be great if the government were more involved with animal welfare organizations and, animal behaviorists and scientists that deal with animals so that they can understand what the sentiments are, what the science is, what the legal and welfare position is, and then to make a decision thereafter, rather than coming out with a policy first and then having to, deal with the backlash.
I think essentially this crux boil down to a balance, assessment of risks. You emphasized clearly the welfare of hamsters, the welfare of animal, while public health officials, the government emphasized on public health concerns and the risk of transmission of the virus from the hamsters, the animals to human. So if you were to sort of convince the public health officials that your priority, the welfare of animal, kind of, overweight that public health concern, what would you tell them?
Well, I think you've caged that question very nicely, and it is a fine balancing act. I mean, it's very difficult for someone to say, the welfare of animals should outweigh the welfare of people, and vice versa. I mean, they are, in my opinion, if all animals are sentient. They're the same as people. They can feel, they can love, they can, express, they can understand pain and feel pain. So we're all on that level plane. So it's just trying to find a balance between everything that ensures that, everything is fairly, is fairly thought out, rather than a decision which overwhelmingly favors one side and completely negatives and neglects the other side.
Now, the debate over the protection of animals as opposed to humans was first ignited when authorities ordered the culling of wild boars when some of the animals were spotted in urban areas. The welfare of hamsters were only brought to light because of the controversial decision to cull them. But did that also expose some institutional and to your expertise, legal loopholes in the protection of animal welfare in Hong Kong?
Well, animal welfare in Hong Kong has always been a very poor area of law.
Less known.
It's less known and it's full of holes. I mean, it's very archaic, it's very old, it's completely outdated. While the rest of the world has moved on with their legislation protecting animals, Hong Kong still fundamentally has the same law that it had about 75 years ago, and nothing's changed. I mean, things, there have been wonderful experts and organizations that have lobbied for change to the current ordinance. That has been for about 10 years now in the works, and we're still yet to see any dramatic changes. So the one thing in Hong Kong, which I've experienced, is if you want things to happen, or if the government want things to happen, things will happen quickly. If they're not too keen on it, it's going to take some time. And that's what we're seeing with animal welfare. And the wild boar situation was just a situation where I think, again, the welfare of animals was not really put at the forefront of the decision made.
Yeah, it's all about priorities. Is that why you founded the Hong Kong Animal Law and Protection Organization?
Yeah, in part. I mean, I've always loved animals. I've grown up with animals all my life, and as a barrister, I mean, one of the things that we strive to do is to ensure that justice is seen to be done. And I was thinking, who out there actually speaks for the animals? Animals don't have voices. They can't express how they feel. So we as lawyers need to speak on their behalf to make sure that justice is served in their respect. So that's fundamentally one of the reasons why this organization was started. And I do have to credit Professor Amanda Whitford of Hong Kong University, who has been an incredible animal welfare light and figure in Hong Kong for a long time. And she's given this organization a lot of her time and given me a lot of guidance. So, I mean, she is partly the reason why we are able to fight for animal welfare in Hong Kong.
Well, I mean, you are a barrister and you study psychology in college in New Zealand,
yes.
Right? And right now, you're also an animal rights activist. You talk about what inspired your activism, and I wonder, how do you manage your different roles?
It's very difficult to find a complete, harmonious existence. On the one hand, I wish I could devote all my time to animal welfare and the problems that we have in Hong Kong, because there are lots of problems that need to be fixed in order for Hong Kong to be, a jurisdiction or a place where people look to and go, wow, their animal welfare standards and laws are actually very, very high and stringent. On the other hand, I am also a barrister. I'm part of Burnaki Chambers, and in order to survive, I have to work on other cases as well. But in a way, that's also beneficial, because in my private practice, I try and do a wide range of law, so criminal law, civil law, public law, things like that. So when cases involving animals come up, I at least know how and what I need to do in order to help out in those instances. So it marries quite well, but it's not perfect.
That's good to hear. And I know that you are also an active member of the Animal Law Association back in New Zealand, where you are licensed to practice as well. Now, you talk about the problems in Hong Kong's animal law regime and how it was archaic and out of date. I wonder, how would you compare the progress in protecting animal rights between New Zealand and Hong Kong, and what is Hong Kong lacking in that regard?
Well, one of the biggest differences that we have between Hong Kong and New Zealand is the pet ownership in New Zealand is much higher than Hong Kong. I think Hong Kong's about 12%, New Zealand's about 60, 70% of households have pets. So that alone already means that a lot more people are closer to and have interactions with animals. New Zealand's also got a big farming community. So we have the dairy community, we have sheep, we have cows, we have pigs, we have lambs, all of that as well. Those are all protected under different laws in New Zealand. In Hong Kong, the law hasn't changed for a very long time. And one of the things that needs to be pushed forward, which has been pushed forward, but we're yet to see any results, is the inclusion of a duty of care. So essentially, you have to be responsible for your own animal. And if you fail to do that, whether it's actively or passively, i.e., not giving it food or water or leaving it out somewhere, you're not creating good animal welfare standards to the animal, that'll be a breach of the law. And that's going to be a huge thing that Hong Kong needs, because at the moment, the legislation or the ordinance is reactive rather than proactive.
Right.
So animals have to suffer before the law steps in. We don't want that.
Yes.
We want to protect the animals before that happens. So that's something that really needs to happen. Other countries already have it. Hong Kong, come on.
I wonder, you talk about, the comparison of pet ownership in New Zealand and Hong Kong, and I wonder, is it because, we know that there's less room in Hong Kong and some people don't want to have pets in their small households, and that in turn reduce the appetite to own pets, and thus the lack of incentive to complete these laws. What's your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you and I both know Hong Kong's a very expensive place to live. And when you're feeding a family of people, that's already expensive. And then you throw in animals as a mix, that's just going to further your costs. And I mean, we live in small apartments compared to places like New Zealand, where you have a house with a backyard and a garden, and going outside is much easier for an animal than apartment animals in Hong Kong. So, I mean, that is a factor that plays into it, I think.
Well, I was told that we're running out of time, but Kim, thank you so much for coming on Talk the Walk and share your perspective with us.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Talk the Walk will return next Saturday on HKIBC. I'm Sarah Wong. See you then, and good night.